Good evening. Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Untitled Chapter at the Madison Church of Christ here in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us online and being a part of our live audience. And if you are in the Nashville, Tennessee area, come visit us on the first Wednesday of each month, 6:30, right here at Untitled Chapter for Stories of Amazing Grace. Our theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I am sure that nothing could separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present nor the future, and not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Tonight, my guest is one of our own members at the Madison Church. Michelle Stanton is award-winning hospice nurse. Hospice is a word that causes anxiety and fear in many people because they equate it with hopelessness and giving up. Michelle says hospice focuses on relieving pain, providing comfort, and increasing a patient's quality of life by addressing the patient's physical, emotional, spiritual, and psychosocial needs. Michelle will address hospice myths and share stories of end-of-life experiences with the patient and her family right after this. Why did God create mankind if he already knew man was going to sin and reject him? Why did he start the whole process to begin with?
Same reason we have kids. It really is. Why do we do it? Because we have so much love and we want to love more.
I've always wondered, it's after Cain killed Abel, it says that he took a wife. Where did he get his wife?
The Bible says that Adam and Eve had many kids and they lived hundreds of years making kids. People say, where did he get his wife then? Well, one of his sisters. And people go, ooh, there was no law against that until Leviticus.
Who are the 144,000 in Revelations?
It is a symbolic number. I believe that the standard explanation is that it is the 12 tribes of Israel times the 12 apostles, and then they multiplied it by 1,000 because 1,000 to them was the biggest number.
Are near-death experiences biblical?
I am not a believer that in near-death experiences you see Jesus or the like, merely because I've looked at the evidence and the stories are not as consistent as people say they are. When you die, your body floods with chemicals to give you peace. It's your body's job. And if you were I've been by many beds where people say it's Jesus, and I don't doubt that they see him. And they may be right, they may be wrong, and I'm comfortable with the mystery because I trust Jesus. So I've had a lot of near-death experiences. I corrected my wife once. That was I saw Jesus 3 times that night.
Please welcome Michelle Stanton. Come on up. Thank you. Well, you were interviewed by Russ, I think, last fall. Mm-hmm. There may be some things, that he didn't cover, and I think we have different people here tonight. I know we got different people watching online, so we're going to go through some of the story again, but also get into hospice care. I see you got some notes here. You got something you want to say before we even start?
Not really.
Okay. You want to say any?
That's if I need to cheat on dates in case we get to that. So.
Well, when I heard the recording from last fall, it said that you grew up in a toxic religion, and Dad was a rageaholic. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So, abuse begets abuse begets abuse, unless you break a cycle, which my family didn't know what cycle breaking was. So my grandfather had been abused by his father. All 10 of my grandparents' children had been abused. They didn't know any differently. That's not excusing it. It's just saying it is what it is. And so out of that, my dad coped with rage. That was his coping mechanism. So it's really like an alcoholic. That's why I call it a rageaholic. It is one of those, in my mind, addiction in a way until you break that cycle.
And you're an outgoing person. Did that limit you and how you could express yourself in the family?
Well, I'm just I'm going to say I'm just like my dad. That doesn't sound good right now, does it? My dad was very outgoing. He preached, he led singing, he was charming. I loved him. I mean, I was a daddy's girl. And so I'm a lot like my dad. The apple doesn't fall far from that tree, for sure.
You grew up in our fellowship, the Church of Christ?
I did, 56 plus years now.
More liberal fellowship, more conservative fellowship?
I grew up in a small country church, if you will, in Williamson County, maybe 200 people at its peak. My dad was very strict, and I just grew up in a strict household, a very fundamental scripture-based church. And I'm glad that I grew up in a church that we were in scripture all the time. And then I went to Christian schools, so I was in the Bible every day. And I'm glad I was. I mean, I do not regret that at all.
And your Bible class, your Sunday school class, you were the only one? Is that what I hear?
I was the only one my age.
Okay.
It was a very small church.
Okay. Was that tough?
I didn't know any differently.
Okay.
So all my friends were older than I am, so.
And you gravitated towards more elderly people.
Please don't be offended if this term offends you. I love older people. When I was 5 and 6, I would sit with that elderly couple that, they wore overalls to church every Sunday. They were back in the Williamson County farmland. Those were the people I loved. I'm still to this day, especially grumpy old men. So I love grumpy old men.
Yeah.
I really do. They're my favorite patients in the whole world.
William? Talking about William, I guess.
See, I'm married to one already. I'm already.
Speaking of William, where did you meet William?
Oh, at Lipscomb, back then in college, Lipscomb College. Now it's Lipscomb University. It was David Lipscomb College. But.
And you just bumped into him on the sidewalk, or how'd this work?
Well, no, there's a story. There's the real story, and then there's the story that everybody else seems to think happened.
Okay.
And the story that everybody seems to think happened, he teaches at Lipscomb, and his students will still bring this up. How they know that, don't know. But we met when he saved my life, throwing me into the shower in the chemistry lab because I sloshed acid all over myself.
Uh-huh.
That's the story.
That's the story, but that's not the real story.
That's not the real story.
That's a good story, though.
It's a great story. And the truth of that is I threw myself in the shower because I sloshed acid and burned holes in my clothes and all that. But he did not save me, and he did not know me then, so.
So how did you really meet them?
Chemistry lab, he would come in and talk to my chemistry professor. So he was teaching at Lipscomb while I was a student, but there was no hanky-panky there. He was never my instructor or anything like that. He would just come in and...
No hanky-panky?
No hanky-panky.
Okay, excellent.
No.
Glad to hear that. We have a wedding picture.
Oh, that's my family. This was in 1990. That's my dad and my mom. That's my oldest niece, Brandy, of course. I don't know who that young couple is there. And then that's my sister holding my middle niece, and she's pregnant with my third niece.
And William was a pretty good-looking guy.
He
back
really
then.
was. He had hair, and it was dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember those days also. Yes. And we have it. Oh, there. Look at there.
Yeah.
And what are you drinking there?
You know what? I didn't drink anything. We didn't get any food. We had to hit the airport to go to Europe. We got nothing. So there was nothing in there, I don't think. Maybe some punch.
And as a result of this union, we have that.
So that's Micah. He's now 27. And that's Mini-Me, Rachel. And she's 24. Yeah, she'll be 25.
And what
in
are they
August.
doing now?
So Micah is one of the managers at the Outback in Hermitage, and Rachel lives in San Diego. Her husband's in the Navy. Hoping to get him back on this side of the States soon.
You mentioned in a previous interview that you really didn't have a true relationship with God. Explain that a little bit. Growing up in the church is such a blessing, and sometimes it is, it's not. I'm just going to be honest. Because we follow rules, we know words, we know the letter of the law, and sometimes we let the letter of the law get in our way of living the spirit of the law. And so it was very...
it was very legalistic. And, I was the perfect child in my family. That's a whole other story. I was a perfect child. And so there was a lot of pressure there. But it wasn't until I fell really hard. I mean, I just fell hard in college. I think that's when the wounds of childhood and just being a human on this planet caught up with me.
Was it
And
in
so
college or high school that the class was known as the alcoholic class?
Yes. So the class of 1986 at Lipscomb High School was known as the alcoholic class. Thank you, claim to fame. I did not drink, but yeah.
Okay, any more about the true relationship you want to share?
Okay. The true relationship. I want to tell you something. It's still God is bringing me into this true relationship with Him, and I find that when I'm at my weakest, He's at His strongest, and so I know God on a very different level now than I did then, and a lot of that's just aging and maturity and wanting that.
Let's talk about the year 1998. Stress and trauma, things that happened around that time.
Okay.
Concerning your sister and
Yes. So in 1998, we were at a family retreat with Antioch Church of Christ. That's where we were going. And I got a call from my mom and saying that my sister had gotten bad news. She'd had this proliferative blood disease for probably about 4 years, and she got word it had turned into leukemia. Fast forward. After all kinds of chemo and all of that stuff, she ended up passing away in March of the next year. During 1999 is really when I really got into a great relationship with God, because if He wasn't going to be there, I was going to be obliterated, really. Major life stressors at that time. Number one, so my sister went to Houston to get a bone marrow transplant. That same weekend that she had that done, we were moving. I got a call the day after her transplant, and she said, I need you to get down here, get my girls down here. And I knew what that meant. So in 1999, from March until August, we moved out of our house. We moved to a different church home, Hermitage. My sister died. Rachel was born in August, needing open heart surgery immediately. We didn't know this, so this was a surprise to us. And then changing church homes was just it was horrible. It really was horrible. So moving twice, we moved in with my in-laws while the house was being built, then moved again. All of life's stressors except divorce, and it's a God thing that we didn't probably. He probably wanted to kick me out. I was just so with everything.
your sister, her appearance. Can you tell us about that some?
So it was really, I wasn't a hospice nurse then, okay? So walk in the hospital room, and what had happened was the leukemia didn't kill her. The treatments had destroyed her liver. And if you know, in liver failure, you've heard of jaundice, you see that. When the bilirubin gets really high, it really affects all kinds of things. So when I walked in, there was blood in the sclera of her eyes. So where you see white, it was filled with blood. She was so orange. I have never seen anyone that orange. Well, before that time I hadn't, now I have. And she had lost all her hair again, which that wasn't such a big surprise. But walking in with 3 young girls who weren't expecting that either. As an adult, I wasn't expecting it. I was pregnant, so I'm all over the place. But yeah, it was a shock. It was a shock.
But the way you handled that impressed the hospital personnel, is that correct?
Yes, well, how we handled that, definitely, there was such peace in our family. The hospital personnel that really got, I'm not going to say impressed, but that God used us to touch was when Rachel was born. She had to be transferred to Vanderbilt from Centennial. And if y'all know Phil Barnes, he was our preacher then. He came and we all stood around with hospital personnel around Rachel in the little incubator thing and prayed for her. But the case manager that came in, she sat down and she said, I just want you to know I'm just now meeting you, but I've heard what a remarkable family you are, and that you're so peaceful and prayerful and, gracious. And like, honey, it ain't me. I'll tell you that right now, because all I want to do is hold my baby, and all I can do is put my finger in a hole and do this on her arm just back and forth. But it was all God. It was just all God.
Let's talk about your education and leading up to nursing school.
Bachelor's in just a bachelor's of science from Lipscomb. Got a master's of science in teaching from MTSU. Then years later, got a bachelor of science in nursing, a BSN from Cumberland University. The master's is from MTSU.
You have a doctorate also, don't you?
I did all the coursework for a PhD in physiology, but by then, William and I are getting a little long in the tooth. It's time to have kids.
Okay. But you went to nursing school, took nursing at Cumberland University.
I did.
And there's a story about the professor asking the class what you plan to do.
So the first day in fundamentals, I go around, what do you want to be? Tell me what part of nursing do you want to go into? Everybody's like, I want to be a flight nurse, I want to be a CCU, ER, and I'm hospice. So it was like, and you could have heard a pin drop. I was the second oldest in the class. I went back when I was 41. So
We got a picture of you, I think, as a...
Oh yeah.
What
So,
year-
sorry about the quality of it, but it's on a composite.
What year would this be, you think?
That would be 2011.
Okay. Well, let's talk about hospice.
Sure, let's do it.
Why did you choose that field?
I've been asked that question. I always thought, well, maybe it was my sister because, of her journey. But I was thinking the other day, and you know what? It started in college. At Lipscomb, I was a biology major and a chemistry minor, but I also was a psychology minor. I had tons of credits for that. I took a class called On Death and Dying. And if any of you are familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she is, in 1969, she wrote a book called On Death and Dying. And that was one of the books I had to read for that class. And I was thinking the other day, I loved that class, and that's where it really started, but it was like a latent seed. And it just finally bloomed decades later, actually.
It wasn't a fearful situation going...
I have never, even as a little girl, I've never had a problem with death. It has never scared me.
You think your attraction to more elderly people perhaps channeled you into hospice care?
It very well may have. I think that God just on this tapestry of my life, all these threads come together to make this beautiful thing that I now get to work in every day. I love it.
Now, you were in the hospital administration type role, or nursing hospice role, hospice administration role. Let me get this out right.
Right. So in hospice, I've done everything. Some of it I really stank at, like sales. Being out in the field is where I'm really, where God has really blessed me, where He uses me more. But for 3 years, I was in management.
How'd that go?
Well, I think He blessed me. The team grew, and the clients grew underneath that management style. But 3 years of 80-hour work weeks, while I lost a father-in-law, and a mother, it really took a toll on me, and I had no life. So I was ready to get life back. So a year ago, I went back out in the field, and I'm an admission nurse now.
And that's where you should be.
I think so.
Well, you gave me some hospice myths to talk about. Myth number one: hospice is only for the last few days of life. No, it's not, right?
Oh my goodness. I have had a 106-year-old lady on for years, and you have to keep qualifying, and as soon as we were going to take her off, she'd get an infection. So it's the reason people think it's for a few days is because people wait too long. They're so afraid of it. So a lot of times people come on late in their process. They were, everybody's appointed a time to die, right? God does that. And sometimes they get in there late. Now, where does a 6 months come from? Somewhere along the way, there had to be in the hospice regs, we got to have a limit to this, right? So the definition is that by a doctor, if he or she says, if this disease process runs its natural course, that person is expected to die within 6 months.
If I die in 7 months, what happens? Do they take me off hospice after my 6
Oh,
months?
no, you have recertification periods. Like I
Okay.
said, you can be on there 2 hours or you can be on there 2 years. It just depends if you recert.
Okay. But this is the norm. 6 months is what the,
Honestly, there's no norm to me.
okay,
It's all norm to me.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the middle of documenting an admission and someone die, and then, like I said, years. So,
Number 2, patients in hospice cannot receive treatment of any kind.
so we do treatments that may be an option. A lot of treatments for comfort. You're not just giving up treatments, period, okay? And you're not just throwing medicines that are going to kill people at them. Like, for instance, let's say someone has liver cancer and they have what we call ascites or a lot of fluid on their belly. Sometimes there's something called a paracentesis. They take a long needle and they stick it into this cavity and they will pull off the fluid. Now, that can be done. Of course, you have to get permission or authorization, but that can be done, and that's called palliative. It's not curative. So sometimes, things like that can be done for comfort.
So difference between palliative and hospice care.
Okay, so here is what most of us have, right? We go to our doctor, we have our checkups, we're in the maintenance stage, so to speak. Palliative is the next. It's getting comfort measures, but you can still have aggressive treatments like chemo or dialysis. Hospice, you move over, and what it is it's the palliative comfort part of palliative care, but no curative options. So we're not going to pursue aggressive treatment. We're doing only comfort, and then that gets into some other myths.
Can I come off hospice care if
my
I'm feeling
goodness.
better after 3 months?
I don't care if you're feeling better or not. If you want to come off, you do sign your name and you're off. And the way your medications, your care was covered before, kicks right back in.
Who pays for it?
Well, if you have Medicare, there's Medicare Part A. So in Medicare Part A, you've got hospital and hospice. So if you're on hospice and for some reason you go to the hospital, that's another story, but if you go and get admitted, then you come off hospice so that Part A will cover your hospital stay. Then if you come back, we can re-enroll you on hospice if you're appropriate for that.
If I'm 30 years old, who pays for it?
Okay, then you're starting to get, if you have insurance, commercial insurance like the Blues or something, most insurances have a hospice clause in them, a benefit, but then you're going to probably be getting into co-pays and deductibles and things like that. But a lot of insurances do have that.
Number 3, there's only one hospice company.
Oh my goodness. I tried to look up how many hospice companies are in the Nashville area alone, and I don't know. There's so many, and they're popping up all over
When
the
does
place.
all start, hospice care? How many years ago?
So hospice really started in the Middle Ages, like in 1065, when people making the trek from the Holy Land, to and from their homes, if they got sick along the way, that's really where hospice care started, taking care of sick travelers. But the modern hospice started over in England in the 70s, and with St. Christopher's. And a nurse who became a doctor, Cicely Saunders, she became a dame. She was deemed a dame by the Queen. She started it there, and then it started in Connecticut a few years later. But the interesting part is, and I do not work for a live hospice. I just want to say that. They're very good hospice. That's not the company I work for. But they started in 1975, and they are one of the oldest hospices in the country, maybe the third oldest or something. So right here in Nashville, we've got the oldest, and then we have other companies too who have their little niches.
How do you choose what hospice company to go with?
Interview.
Yeah?
Interview.
And you're looking for what?
You're looking a lot about just for me, it's a gut feel, but do you like who you're talking to? Do you like the feel? Do you like what they offer? For instance, our company is the only company in the area that has a certified music therapist, like a true therapist, not just go and play the guitar. So everybody has their own little things.
And this search should begin at a certain age, or what?
I think that whenever you get a very serious diagnosis and you're seeing that your curative options are starting to run out or, not working as well, it's good to go ahead and do it. It's never too early.
Are there always openings for the dying to get hospice care, or
Always.
are they booked up?
Always.
Okay.
Always. And if I think that another company can meet your needs better than my company, I do lead you that way. I don't, I know I shouldn't say that, so don't show this to my bosses.
What company you work with?
I work for Accent Care. It used to be Guardian, but now it's Accent Care.
Okay. Number 4, hospice means the patient must give up hope.
It really is not giving up hope. I think, so in hospice, it's really changing your goals of care. So if I have cancer and I'm getting chemo or, something like that, an aggressive treatment, and it's not really working, my goal of care while I'm on it is to get well, When that's not working anymore, or I feel worse from the treatment, I may want to change my goal of care to having a great time with my family, being comfortable. It's whatever you want. I mean, I really have a good story about that if I can tell it.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I had a patient out in Mount Juliet one time, and he had been on an experimental drug for cancer, made him sick as a dog. Like, I'm talking after one treatment. And he was miserable. And so the family said, we're over this. We're just going to go hospice and whatever. I think they didn't really know how good it could be. So I went over there, talked to him, and, got the comfort medications on. Well, a week later, he's starting to feel better. He's sitting up in his chair. He's got a lot of swelling, but we're getting the meds on. And I said, so what is your goal? Because we talk about goals a lot. What is your goal? He said, you know what? I want to go to the Wilson County Fair, and I want to eat a corn dog. I said, all right. He said, do you think I can do that? And I'm like, you know what? Let me talk to your son. Let's see what we can do, because there's gravel there, and you're going to have to be in a wheelchair. Worked it all out. He went to the fair. This was in August, because that's when the Wilson County Fair is. He came home, and I saw him after the fair, and I said, well, did you get your corn dog? He said, I got myself 2 corn dogs. And I'm like, yes, and he was so happy, and he was at such peace. He died that was August. I think he died in September, and I was there when he passed. He was near the end. The wife called, and I was there, so I got to end his journey with him after being with him.
Do a lot of people have requests like that?
Sure. I had one lady who wanted to go to Disney World. Yeah, there are a lot of things like that, or to see my son's wedding, to see my grandchild again. And there are a lot of stories about that too, about people hanging on for certain things.
Number 5, hospice shortens life expectancy.
Did you know that research has shown that hospice actually, when people get on it soon enough, not in the last day of life, it can actually extend life 29 days. And that's the average. Sometimes it's longer.
See, that doesn't sound like a lot. I guess when you only got 6 months to live, that is a lot.
Well, that's another month.
It is another month. Almost.
And what can you do in that month? You don't care about having a fancy house. You don't care. I have seen patients told somebody tonight, in a tent behind a gas station. Then I have been the hospice nurse for movie stars and television stars. If I told you their names, you would know them. And everybody in between. And you know what? In those last days of life, everybody's equal. Everybody's equal. And so.
Have you seen the video we showed before you came up, talked about near-death experiences? Have you seen some of those?
Ooh, yes, I have.
Okay,
And that's the
share.
exciting part. I have, oh, wow, okay. I had a patient one time, and I can tell you this because he's gone, but he was one of the co-founders of Cracker Barrel. He actually ended up in the hospital in ICU for some reason. Don't ask me how, because I'm that. And he was sitting there, and I walked in, and he was just like looking beyond. And I went over and I said his name, and I said, "It's Michelle, I'm here." And he looked over at me like this and said, "Hi." And then he went back like this. And I asked him, I said, Are you seeing people that aren't in the room? And he's like, and then I'd ask him something, "Well, are you in pain?" "No." Then I had one man in his recliner trying to change his clothes and stuff. And he was just kind of doing like, looking off. And I said, Mr. Jimmy, what are you seeing?" He goes, "People." I said, "Well, are they nice people? Because we got to know this, okay? I've seen one really horrible death in my life, and I don't want to see that again." And he goes, "Really nice people." And we got him pulled back up in his chair, and he died. Yeah, a man looking out the window, wife says, "And what are you looking at?" He goes, "I'm just wondering why that angel is out there." I mean, just amazing things.
And do you equate that with actually seeing something or a chemical?
I know what he said, and I'm not saying that what he's saying, he's very brilliant. He could be very right about that. And
I
I'm
don't
not
think
gonna
he's
go.
saying one way or the other
But
necessarily.
no, but the chemical part that he did address, that could be, but do I believe? I believe. I believe. I mean, the apostles thought Jesus was a ghost. Now, why would that come to mind? Why would they think a ghost? Why not, "Oh, there's a big, thick thing of fog"? They didn't say that. They thought he was a ghost. So, yeah, I believe.
Be ready for some questions. Are you ready? Tell me about the dying process.
Well, everybody has their own journey, right? There are signs that we look for. I would like to dispel, or I would like to give people some comfort in some things, okay?
Physically, what happens?
Yes, and that's part of it. So physically, you're going to see what happens is the brain says, fingers, toes, and knees, you are not nearly as important as heart, lungs, kidneys, etc., the organs, right? So the brain starts shunting the oxygenated blood into the center and the core. So you will see extremities getting cold. You may see them getting dusky or blue. You may see them getting purple splotchy. We call that mottling. You can see that.
Scary, it sounds like.
If you're not prepared for it, my job as a hospice nurse, especially since I'm the first one they're going to see, is educate. That's the number one thing we do, is educate. And we're telling people, and we're showing them. There's something I call pre-modeling, which really isn't a real thing in the medical world, but I know when it's about to happen. I've seen it so much, and I start the family right then. This is what I'm seeing, and this is what it may look like. So I just want you to be prepared so you're not scared when you see it. Breathing changes. People get pale. People stop eating, and we want to force food down them, and that's the worst thing you can do. Yeah.
Question? Comment?
My husband, Clint, died almost a year ago, the 24th of this month. And it was an easy death. He never had any pain. We had a medicist with us, which, when he was in the hospital those last few days, they came and said, "Which hospice do you want?" Well, whenever they say that, So we chose a medicist because my cousin Joanne had used a medicist. And they were wonderful. I mean, that hospital bed was in the house before we ever arrived home by ambulance. They had everything there. I mean, you don't have to think about anything. Yeah, all the meds he would need, everything.
Right.
And he lived at home for a little over a week on hospice. He was never uncomfortable, except he was allergic to morphine and Dilaudid, had a horrible rash, itched horribly. That was the only discomfort he had until they put a fentanyl patch on his back. But he had not been able to open his eyes and really communicate because he was breathing. His breathing was so bad. Until about the last 30 minutes of his life, and I was standing right beside him, and all of a sudden his eyes flew wide open, and he was just staring. And he would look at faces and look, and he wouldn't close his eyes. So he couldn't communicate with us. But we were all right there with him the whole time. It was really a peaceful experience. So I feel good about the hospice. It was wonderful. And then as soon as he died, we called, and they were there instantly with us and taking care of us.
I'm so glad you had a good experience. Some people don't, and when people don't, you tend to hear about the bad experiences, but the majority of experiences are good, and I'm so glad you had that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm not sure how to actually ask this. Of course, I have a living will, and I know that has to do with not having anything added to you when you're terminal. What happens when you know that you are in a dementia type stage and you know where you're going? Are you able? Do you have to write something up and say, okay, no more medicines? No. And the reason I'm asking that is because I have a brother. Everyone in my family, my older 5 brothers and siblings, all have passed away, and it all had to do with dementia. Mm-hmm. And so my brother that was 2 years older than me, at that time COVID was there, and he had the Delta and whatever. But he already knew that he was headed towards losing all of his memory. I mean, he still had a little bit, but he didn't have a lot. Mm-hmm. So while he was in the hospital, he refused to have anything to eat. He refused to have any IVs, no water, no anything. Do you have to have something in writing when you know you get to that point? Because it's different than a living will. So if you know you're coming down either with heading into the bad part of dementia, which would lead maybe possibly to Alzheimer's, do you have to have a special written thing that says, okay, at what point can I say, I want nothing else, I'm ready to go home anyways?
So my advice in that is if you do not have something documented in writing and notarized, I hope that you have someone very close to you who is willing to honor your wishes. My husband has fought me before on my final wishes, and we finally got a living will, and so that I want my wishes to be honored. But if you don't have that, have someone trusted. And in Tennessee, there is a hierarchy of who is next in line to make your decisions, like a spouse, a child, etc. So hopefully, if you don't have that, and I advise everybody to have your wishes down somewhere where people know what they are.
Easier with a living will when it comes
is.
to medical stuff or physical stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's not anything out there for mental.
Well, when you lose your faculties, then your closest next of kin or relationship, that's who the medical community is going to defer to, or you don't want the doctors making the decision for you. Right. So I really encourage the written part. But hopefully, if you don't have it, you have someone you're married to, you live with, or that's close to you that knows and will honor your wishes. Like my daughter will definitely, oh, mama's gone, we're just going to let her go. And I'm fine with that. But that's how she, she would honor my wishes. And my husband will too now after I kind of beat him into it.
Hey, Michelle, my friend.
Hey, friend.
In the past 5 years, we have gone through Lee's mother and father both passing away. And they were very, very elderly, lived long, full lives. But we dealt with hospice with both of them, and I just sing their praises. I mean, it was such, an experience with them, so comforting, so loving, so kind. And just as one example, Lee's father was a veteran of World War II. And so they knew this. We were at Tennessee Christian. Is that what you still call it? I guess.
Close
the
enough.
Hospice there, whatever they call it. But anyway, that's where we were. And so they knew he was a veteran. He died at like 12:30 in the morning, a little after midnight, I think, something like that. So they arranged for the ceremony to take place, honoring him, the flag, the whole 9 yards. By the time we got my mother-in-law there, we had to go get her there because it was like so late. We sent her home to rest. And they came and they did the whole ceremony, and this was like probably 2:30 in the morning by the time everything transpired. They didn't care. They acted like it was 9 o'clock in the morning. It was beautiful, just beautiful. And Lee and his brother, they were so grateful. I just can't tell you how wonderful it was. It was wonderful. And then with my mother-in-law, they were fantastic with her too. Lee's brother was having a hard time with it, and they were so kind to him and so comforting and got him through it. They really kind of got him through it better than we did. So anyway,
that's great.
I sing their praises over and over.
Well, I'm so glad you had a wonderful experience. And you brought something up that's very important to know about the difference between regular care and hospice. So I go to my doctor, he addresses me. In hospice, it's patient and total family, or whatever you consider your family. And it's not just medical. This is why I love hospice and why I went into it, Larry, is because I always loved medicine. I was going to be a doctor. Well, didn't quite end up there. The medical, the spiritual. I get to pray with my patients. I get to sing with them. I get to talk God with my patients. The psychosocial, well, that's another story. That's the hardest part of my job.
What does that mean, psychosocial?
So I've been taking care of my mama for 10 years, and my sister out in California now decides it's at the end of life. I'm going to come in and she's going to tell me what to do. So family dynamics, things like that. It's mental, it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's everything. So what hospice does is it addresses all of that in the patient. It addresses all of that in the support system. When a person passes, the hospice benefit allows for the hospice to follow the primary bereaved for 13 months. That gets you through the first year of, the year of first, right? So I love it. It's a holistic way of taking care of patient and family.
Anybody else? While you're thinking, any other hospice stories that you want to share?
I'm going to share my personal story in just a minute.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hey, Michelle.
So glad you're here tonight.
Thank you. What does that mean that the hospice benefit follows for 13 months? What does that mean?
So we call it the hospice benefit. So what is provided under the hospice benefit? Okay. So you have a diagnosis. The hospice benefit covers medications, supplies, and equipment related to that diagnosis, and for anything that's comfort, like comfort medication related, etc. The hospice benefit also follows a family, whatever that is considered to that patient, follows a family or a primary bereaved that's been identified, a husband, a wife, a child, children, for 13 months. That means that you may get a card, you may get an email, you may get a call, you may get invited to a memorial service. And that is to help you. And let's say you've recently lost your mother, and my heart goes out to you. Thank you for that precious time. That they will reach out to you, and if you need, they can counsel you. Our chaplain, or we can put you in grief support groups. We're here to help you. I could talk for days. I don't need questions if you don't have any.
You had a personal story.
Yes, my personal story. So my father died in September of 21. My mom came to live with us, and over that year, she declined. She was in her 80s. So she had been, we put her on hospice, and then we took her off because she wanted to try some, PT and stuff. So she was in a facility getting PT. I had decided to step away from management and to go back into the field, and I said, I want that month-long training because we'd had a merger, and I just wanted to know the new way of doing things. So that Friday was my last day in training. And I told my mom, she was going to PT that morning. I talked to her, I said, hey, I'm going to go meet my music therapist, do something with him in Franklin, then I'm going to come back to Donaldson. Walked out of the building and get a phone call from the nurse. Michelle, your mom's had an episode in the wheelchair coming back from PT. Can you get here? And I said, I'm about 25 minutes away. I will get there. She said, yeah, our O2 sats have dropped into the 60s, so we did put her on oxygen. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming. So then I'm 5 minutes away, and Nurse Sam calls me again, and she said, we asked your mom if she wanted to go to the hospital. Let's call 911. And she said, yes, but I'm waiting on Michelle. I want to wait on Michelle. 5 minutes later, I walk into her room, and I can tell she's actively dying. She has that purple color, and it's not just on her toes. It is up her legs. This is all in 1 hour. She has the glassy-eyed look. Those of you who have had a loved one pass, you know that glassy-eyed look. And she had the end-of-life breathing, where it's like a fish out of water. And I'm like, wow, because we had just talked that morning. Her face was turned toward the door. And I walked in, and I walked over to her, and I touched her face, and I said, Mom, I'm here, I love you, and I am so proud of you. About that time, William calls. Nurse practitioner's in the room, and while I'm on the phone with him, she's listening to my mom, and she turns to me, and she kind of does this number. And so I hang up with him, and I go over. My mom, after I had gotten there, turned her face toward the window, and she had passed. I'm waiting on Michelle. And she waited on me. There are just miraculous stories about people hanging on until they hear that one voice, or until their family leaves and they can have peace and pass peacefully. I mean, so one thing that I tell families is do not feel guilty about leaving or not leaving. Just always tell your loved one, Mom, it's 7, I'm going home to shower, I'll be back at 9. Give your loved one that opportunity to decide if they want to spare you that moment or if they want you there. It's never the wrong thing for you to do. So please don't have guilt about that.
Anybody else before we close up here?
I find that a lot of people are afraid of touching people when they're dying. One of Jerry's cousins was dying, and his family just could not be in the room. And Jerry held one hand and I held the other hand until he died. I was in a situation with a church where a man was dying. His last request was that some people come and sing for him. And I walked in, he put his hand out and I took his hand. And when we were leaving after we sung, people would say, what if he had died while you were holding his hand? And what do you say? You know, he would be dead. That's all. I mean, he was alive and now he's dead. He's not going to help me or anything like that. But it's something I can do.
That's right.
And there's nothing wrong with somebody that can't do it.
That's right.
It's just difference.
It is. I'm glad you brought up touch. What I want to say about touch, well, Jesus touched. And his touch healed, whether it healed the way we think of healing or whether it healed something we can't see, a scar or a wound. I am a huge toucher. I hug and kiss all of you, all right? So just be ready. When someone is dying, their energy is not focused on this world that we're in. That's why they don't want to eat. Their body's dying anyway. It doesn't need the food like we think. It needs a spiritual food. They don't need to have a lot of loud noises around them. So if you're in there, if you want to tell good stories and laugh, if you're going to be loud, it's better to be away. But touch. A lot of people go in, Mama, I love you, and they're just rubbing. I highly advise against that. It's annoying, and it's annoying to them, and it just activates nerve endings and people can get agitated, which is the very opposite of what we want to do. If you're going to touch someone, my advice, based on years of experience, is touch. You may pat and say, Mom, I'm here. Touch. Okay? We don't want to over-excite anybody. We don't want to over-stimulate. That's not what they need. They're focusing somewhere else now, so let's not take their attention away from the next part of their journey.
You need to talk louder.
So that's a good question. So hearing is the last to go. How do we know that? Years and years of hither, thither, yon, trial and error. People who have had hearing loss, a lot of times what we've seen from people who have been to the edge and back is that their hearing will come back. It's almost like now that they're focused on here, some of those things, those last senses will come back. You do not need to scream at people. Mom, I'm here. It's more, Mom, I'm so proud of you and I love you. So a gentle talk, a gentle voice, you don't need to yell at them. They can probably hear you.
I was with a person a few years ago that I loved and knew, and she asked for me to be there with her, and so another person was there with her, and we sang to her. Tell me about how how that impression, that singing, what is going on? We were singing songs, hymns, church stuff.
You know what? There's something, because it reaches to something that's not physical. It reaches to the spirit, regardless of where that person is spiritually, unless they are in a really deep, dark place, like one person I saw. I think it really is calming. So our music therapist, we had a patient that this rarely happens, but we went to the hospital 2 weeks ago. I wasn't there, but the patient was being extubated. Okay, you got a tube down your throat to help you breathe. The family said no more, extubate. Our music therapist went there and played gentle music on his guitar, because true music therapy is a therapy. It is to address symptoms. So he played calmly while meds were pushed and that tube came out, and it was very, very peaceful.
I guess it's my turn. Hey, Michelle.
Hey!
I just wanted to say, in 2020, my mother was in the hospital, and they told me that they were going to need a hospice person, and I thought, let me call Michelle.
Oh, thank you.
And Michelle actually went to school at the Lipscomb with my sister, my younger sister. So we didn't realize we knew each other that way. But, Michelle was very helpful. She told me who to call. And at that time, it was Ann. And the hospice nurses that took care of Mom where she was at, because we took her down to the one on Charlotte. And they were great. To speak for Michelle, she's got a big heart. I know that very much because I've gotten to know her quite well singing with her. And all the hospice nurses that we ran into, be it with my mom or Sheila's mom, were just super people. Just real quick to tell you, when we were at the one on Charlotte, when Mom finally did pass away, they got her ready. They put a quilt over top of her, and they walked her through the room, or the hallways, to take her back to where ambulance or whatever was going to take her away. And as we walked through that hallway, all the nurses that were there, they turned and just sort of stood, out of respect for what they were doing. So hospice nurses are great. I had another friend who dealt with some hospice stuff, and every nurse I've ever met, and I know Michelle's a great person, a good friend, and they're super people, and I want to thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And I know our time is up. I guess I really wanted to end on something, but my train derailed, but it's something Don hits it. I know what I'm going to say. Yesterday was the 12th anniversary of my hospice nursing. I can't believe it's been 12 years. And it's not me. It's all him, okay? It is all him. But a person doesn't stay in hospice as long as some of us have been in hospice for a paycheck, okay? We stay in for a higher calling, and it has to be a calling. It really does, because you know what? We experience the grief with our families and our patients. We carry that burden too, and so, but it's a burden of love, and I don't mean to be cliche. It's really my passion, and I love what I do, and I'm so grateful God has given me the opportunity to do it and to share this time with you.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
The founder of hospice, Dame Cicely Saunders, made this famous hospice quote: "You matter because you are you. and you matter to the end of your life. We will do all we can, not only to help you die peacefully, but also to live
Yes.
until you die.
Yes.
And from the Bible, Psalm 73:26, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever.
Amen.
Thank you again for being
Thank
with us.
you.
Take time to share your story of amazing grace with someone this week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next month on Stories of Amazing Grace. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you.